Very good evening. Thanks for joining us here on The Big Focus. I'm Afrida Rehman Ali. Today our focus is on our neighboring nation of Sri Lanka. We are going to get you the big picture with experts to help us decode and deconstruct the turmoil that we see right now playing out in the capital, Colombo, where protesters have got aggravated in the last 24 hours with multiple instances of violence reported. And amid the continued unrest unfolding in the crisis-hit nation, Sri Lanka has now given sweeping powers, emergency powers, to both the military and the police. After being granted emergency powers, the military and the police could actually detain people without warrants. This comes a day after violent clashes broke out in the capital, which killed 7 and injured nearly 200 others. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who continues to hold fort even after prolonged calls for his resignation, has now extended the nationwide curfew till 11th May. The island nation clearly is battling its worst crisis ever, whether it's food, fuel, medicine. In fact, soaring prices and power cuts have compelled large number of citizens to take to the streets and demand resignation of the Rajapaksas. Let me introduce, joining us here on the program, Mr. Iqbal Athas, political editor of Sunday Times. Joining us also is Professor Asanga Abaya Gunasekara, who's a strategic advisor in the area of geopolitics and international security. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Very good evening. Mr. Athas, if I can begin with you. What we see from here is an agitated nation. The entire nation, in a way, has come together, blurring all ethnic fault lines. And we know that now the public is divided along political lines as well. To what extent do you think that this is a situation that has come about, as the people in Sri Lanka say, because of misgovernance of the Rajapaksas? In fact, public sentiment is very clear that the proximity to China has proved to be disastrous. What is your take on this, sir?
In this particular instance, I wouldn't say that China had any involvement in this. This is the direct result of yesterday's incidents. Prime Minister Rajapaksa had summoned nearly 3,000 local councillors to make an announcement which never came. And that was the announcement that he was quitting his office. But instead, when the meeting was over, there were crowds who were present in the gathering who went on a rampage, assaulting the protesters, both outside temple trees, where the official residence of the Prime Minister lay, and further beyond at the Golface Green, where the protests have been going on for nearly a month now. So this had a chain reaction. Immediately after the attacks began, there were retaliation. And the protesters immediately identified the number of politicians whom they claimed were responsible for bringing in thugs to carry out attacks against them. There were nearly 20 houses in different parts of the country that were burnt.
Yes.
When the ruling Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna offices were burnt down in some of the principal towns, and that uneasiness continues. But the level of violence has receded today. And the curfew that was declared is due to end at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Okay, but you know what we find absolutely startling is to see the level that the public anger has reached, that they are now burning down residences of government officials, of ministers. Professor Asanga, where do you stand on this issue? The fact that the crisis clearly is peaking at the moment. We were earlier talking about the economic crisis, the food shortage, the sufferings of the people on one hand. Now there is also, to top it and to make it worse, is a political crisis. PM Rajapaksa, after much reluctance, has stepped down. But how do you see the nation emerging from this crisis, Professor?
It's a serious crisis. It's gone out of control. Iqbal just mentioned clearly, what happened was they used thugs, they used to attack the symbolic place where they were protesting. It was a symbolic place of demonstration. There was peaceful protests now turned to aggravated towards violence.
Yes.
And so it's gone out of proportion. The problem is that they don't understand the pain of the people. A packet of milk powder is about, now it's costing so much, about 4 or 5 times more. I just spoke to one of the protesters. They are hungry. They had only one meal a day. They can't afford. The gas is about 4,500 rupees. It used to be 1,500. There is a serious crisis in the country. It's going towards a humanitarian crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis right now because they're hungry. They have only one meal, and they can't afford the food. So with this, what the Prime Minister, before his resignation, what he did was, sending all these people to, towards the protest site, the symbolic place where they were talking about a re-democratization, of the country. And it was very peaceful. The protests were very peaceful, but then it turned to violence. So it's completely anarchic situation right now in Sri Lanka.
We also need to understand, and Mr. Atsas, I would like to come to you on this, that, do you think that some solution should emerge politically first? The president has been offering this formula of a joint sort of a governance with members of the opposition. That sort of configuration doesn't seem to be working out, does it?
Well, it appears as if that particular issue is now going out of the reach of the president. And the reason is particularly yesterday's incident. And the chain reaction it set off has also made the participants who want to be a party to an interim government think twice about it. And now today they were meeting because there is an important meeting with the president tomorrow with all of them. And most of them expressed the view that the only way out of this situation is for the president to step down. But the question is whether he would do so. And one also has to bear in mind that apart from what Professor Begunasekara said now, there are other issues. The problems are yet to get worsened. Like, for example, take the supply of fuel. At the moment, they are still enjoying the largesse of the government of India. Supplies are coming in, although there are interruptions in the electricity and so on. But there is going to be a time sooner than later when all this is going to run dry. And that is going to push the people into anarchic levels.
Let's play out for our viewers the kind of statements that we have from the top leadership. And there on your screens right now is the tweet by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who says, "I appeal and urge people to remain calm and stop violence and acts of revenge against citizens, irrespective of political affiliations. All efforts will be made to restore political stability through consensus within constitutional mandate and to resolve economic crisis." Professor Asanga, along with this, now we've also heard that there is an attempt to reconvene parliament. Here is a nation now currently without any government in place. Now that could only make matters worse, isn't it? Is there a possibility that the parliament can reconvene before the designated date of 17th May? What are the possibilities that you see, sir?
Immediately, they need to have an interim government in place because Sri Lanka is going through an economic crisis. It needs these institutions. It needs to function the ministries. So interim government is the only way that for immediate solution. People are hungry. They will get more. I would get agitated if the crisis keeps on going like this in the villages, in different parts of the, so it will be completely out of control where military would have to come in. I mean, the Gotabaya, with his background, so my concern is that whether he is waiting for that moment. But like Mr. Atta said, the first criteria, what the protesters want is president to step down. They don't want to see any Rajapaksas. They are corrupt. Every interview I've conducted, they said they are corrupt. They are done. Basically, we don't want the Rajapaksas. So interim government, opposition, as well as the other parties getting together, immediately functioning the government. That's really important because you don't have a government. You need to have an interim government to function the institutions.
Yes, and that probably is the kind of sentiment expressed by the president. However, at the moment, what is also a matter of huge concern, Mr. Iqbal Asas, is the suffering of the common people. And what we see right now, and social media is full of videos, and in fact, I just saw a video where one protester is dumping another protester in a garbage van. The anger on both sides actually is now quite bad, and those pictures that we are playing out for you also show the level of control that is being imposed. But I want you to, as somebody based in Colombo, take us through what people are going through, the sufferings of a common Sri Lankan.
Well, there is a lot of frustration. There is also a lot of anger. If you look at, a while ago, you referred to a tweet from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Yes.
If such a tweet came from any other Sri Lankan, one could have understood it, because it's a condemnation of violence. He is abhorring violence. But here is the president of Sri Lanka, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed services, who has only a few days before declared a state of emergency throughout Sri Lanka and introduced a curfew. And he is not talking about any of the measures to ensure some form of calm and also to ensure that the law and order is maintained at some point. So this is also a frustration that has driven the people to take the law into their own hands. And you will also see this being reflected by the reactions from a number of countries. Take India, for example. Their own External Affairs Ministry's statement today says that all the assistance they have been offering so far is to help the people of Sri Lanka, and that they respect democracy. And there is a message for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in that statement. So have been countries like the United States, France, Germany, and so on. So a kind of lawlessness has been created by those who are voted to govern and to rule the country.
Absolutely. Lawlessness, you're saying, is being created by those who are supposed to actually manage the law and order situation. So clearly, after the Prime Minister's resignation, what we see is a political impasse. What is important, like we heard Mr. Abagunaseka also say, is an interim government which will bring things under control. People are divided along political lines. Now, will President Gotabaya step down? Will that lead to something? Quick last word from both the panelists. You first, Mr. Iqbal.
Well, there is a serious issue there. The issue is one of how the parliamentarians are going to visit the House to pass legislation, to take up various issues. The government has not only a domestic problem in trying to have a government, but it also has to send a message to the international community, because it is negotiating with the IMF for a loan to ensure there is some form of relief to Sri Lanka. So when you don't have a government, that's a minus, and that minus is bound to continue. And now, until yesterday, things are on an even keel. And we have the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, which is an association of the legal profession in Sri Lanka. They were intervening with the president and also with various opposition parliamentarians to reach accord on some understanding. Say, for example, an interim prime minister and an interim government for a specific period, during which they will backtrack on some of the constitutional changes that have been brought about. And at the end of it, they will do away with the executive presidency. But now yesterday's incidents have created a crisis of confidence. Now most of them are saying that they can't market it to the country, that people are agitated, and that it would not go down, and MPs will find it difficult to come to the House.
And quite mysteriously, one member of parliament died. He apparently knocked down 3 protesters and then took a bullet. Now it's yet unclear whether he shot himself. There are multiple versions of that incident. I'm also going to show our viewers the pictures that we are getting on your screen. There are 3 different kind of visuals coming in. First, you will see, of course, protesters, how they're defying curfew. Anger is on the boil in crisis-hit country, and despite a nationwide curfew, protests have continued. The public uprising is not sparing even the opposition leaders. So in the second box, you will see how opposition leaders are facing the ire of the supporters of the Rajapaksa family. You will see opposition leader Sajid Premadasa being attacked by a mob of protesters. That's what's playing out on your screens right now. The third box is where we are showing you Basil Rajapaksa's house being attacked. Basil is one of Rajapaksa brothers who once held the portfolio of finance ministry. Earlier also, protesters set ablaze the ancestral house of the Rajapaksa family. So, Professor Asanga, I wanted your view as well on the issue of whether it will get worse before it gets better. Do you think that people will not settle for anything less than President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the other brother also now stepping down. Only then, once you completely dismantle the close cabal of the Rajapaksas, can something emerge? Do you also subscribe to that view?
Oh, yes, definitely. Because here is the situation that the protesters will not stop the protests until President Rajapaksa stepped down. And you can see, I mean, the houses are targeted, their properties, they're basically also the luxurious sports cars, many other, I mean, they've been burned. So people don't care at this particular moment. So what they want is, Rajapaksa's, the corruption to end. They want the president to step down. And after the president steps down, I think things will get back to normalcy. Because you have to think, like the US ambassador has clearly mentioned, she said, look at the long term. No one is looking at right now immediate solution, bringing in emergency, gazette notification on April 22nd. Those are, I mean, bringing the military into forefront is not the direction that the country should go, because there is a serious danger in it. And we are receiving assistance from India and many other countries. But I think the international community should assist Sri Lanka to get into, form this interim government. And also, if they want to go for elections in a few months' time, yes, we can help, the democratic wheels to function. That's really important.
And I would like to end by also bringing you the other voice. Let's play out that tweet once again. This is what the opposition leaders have to say. We heard what President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has to say now. Sajid Premadasa, who's leader of the opposition party, says an inclusive and peaceful protest was crushed. He says it was brought to an end by the state-sponsored violence. The Rajapaksas are fully responsible for the destruction that they have unleashed. They have to be held accountable for their criminal acts. Well, on that note, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Really appreciate your sharing your expert opinion and views on the current situation in Sri Lanka. Thanks for watching.